So one of the great blessings of being a radio host is that sometimes your favorite musicians come through town and you get to interview them. And I recently got to have that experience with somebody who is not just one of my favorite musicians, my favorite musician, but truly a personal hero of mine, somebody who I think of as the gold standard when it comes to what storytelling can be. This person's name is Todd Snider. He's classified in different ways depending on how you think about music. Folk singer, Americana artist, troubadour, I think is the one that he used most often to describe himself. And he was going to be coming through town earlier this month to play a show in Phoenix. He has a new record out, and I was thrilled. I cannot express how much his music and his sensibility have meant to me. So we do the interview, and it's wonderful, but there is this very melancholy tone to it as I'm talking to him. And that's not necessarily out of character in terms of the kinds of music that he writes, which has always been this very playful blend of nostalgia and social commentary and personal narrative and character study. But he says at one point in the conversation, I would rather be remembered for the way I lived my life than the songs I sang. And I thought, that's kind of a heavy thing to bring into the conversation. He said it in this sort of unprompted way. And as he said it, I just had this little ping of a thought that one of the things that is interesting to me about Todd Snider, and that has been one of the great joys of the last year and a half or so of my life, is that about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago at this point, he announced that he was going to be re-releasing all of his records, digital versions of all his records, for free, and he just wanted to give all the music away. And so he released these versions of every single one of his full-length albums, where he did the thing that I love the most about him, where he didn't just play the songs, he also told the stories behind how the songs came into existence. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But at the time he started doing that, I remember thinking, why is he just giving it all away? Does he feel like he's at the end of the line? And then I thought, death and kind of messy living around the fringes have always been major themes in Todd's songs. And even if he takes a playful tone towards them sometimes, and tries to lighten the way that we think about these things, it is clearly a fixation of his. And so when he said this thing in the interview, I just got a little worried. And so I didn't ask him about it right in that moment. And we started talking about the way he lives his life, that he wants to be remembered for. And he described it, and this is very Todd Snider. If anybody watching this is a Todd Snider fan, the way he lives his life, he said, is, "Hallelujah, I'm a bum." And he talked about how, for him, the troubadour's life is not a casual thing. It's a commitment to moving through the world where your guitar is basically a passport or maybe an excuse to have every kind of experience. And your responsibility is to then take those experiences and make up songs about them. And so as an example, he said his favorite thing to do for years and years and years when he was on tour has been to get into whatever town he's playing in, get off the bus, and then not be at the venue, not get ready for the show, but rather go find a bar where people are drinking during the day and sit down with them, start talking, seeing what kind of connection he can make. Inevitably, he said that would lead to one of them inviting him to go on some adventure or caper of some kind. And he would say yes, and he would go, and he would follow that wherever it led for hours and hours and hours during the day. And then around 7 o'clock, he said, having not told these people that he was with who he was, he would say, so do you guys want to go see a folk show? And then they would say, what do you mean? And he would say, come with me. And then they would go to the venue and he would get them in. And then he would go up on stage and he would start performing all of these songs that he had made up about adventures like the ones he had spent that day having with these people. And that was what he meant about the commitment to the troubadour's life, that is the responsibility, is to go out and be with people and connect with people and then make music about those people. And the thing that I have always loved, I mean, it's hard to pick one thing, but one of the things that I have always loved about Todd Snider's music is that the people that he celebrates in his songs are people that most people ignore or don't think about or don't treat as valuable people with hearts beating in their chests. He often makes songs about people who have made a lot of mistakes, but are still trying to make fewer mistakes. There's a really wonderful song of his that I could not recommend more highly called Just Like Old Times, where the song's about a gambler who hustles a bunch of people in some town, wins a bunch of money, opens up a newspaper to look for some company, as he puts it in the song, and he ends up seeing a picture of a woman who he went to high school with. And he goes, oh my God. And he calls her, and he sets up a date to meet with her at a hotel, but not because he wants to sleep with her, just because he hasn't seen her since high school and he wants to catch up. And they're sitting in the hotel and they're talking, and the cops come and knock at the door, and they're drinking and doing some coke, but they're just reminiscing. And he goes to the door and he opens it, and the cop says, I know who she is. Like, you know, and it seems like he's about to arrest them. And the gambler in the song says, like, well, sure she is, but that's not all she is. She's also an old friend of mine. That's a direct lyric from the song. And he says, look, I have her high school picture right here in my wallet from 1982. And then again, as the song goes, no, sir, officer, no offense taken. You have a good night too. And the idea is that what he said to this police officer is like, you think this woman that I'm here with is just some sex worker that you're going to bust, but actually she's my old friend. And the officer recognizes that and leaves. And then the gambler goes back into the hotel room, and the woman that he's with is getting very sentimental. And he says, like, oh, that's just something I kept. And we never find out the full range of what their connection was or anything, but it's just this intensely, it's like a little one-act play that unfolds in the space of a 3-minute song. And I don't know if this is specifically true, but I like to imagine that the characters in that song are people that Todd met on one of these adventures that he went on one day. There's another song of his called Train Song that is about this guy named Skip Litz, who is a Vietnam veteran who had moved to East Nashville, which is where Todd lives. And he's kind of like the drug hookup for all the musicians in town. He also does live sound at a lot of the venues in town. And so if you need a cable or a guitar pick or a guitar or something, Skip's the guy you call. Skip's also an alcoholic, a drug user in addition to a drug dealer, and seems to be dealing with a lot of trauma from his experience in Vietnam, and this is how he's processing all of it. The reason the song is called Train Song is because he has this reputation for walking into clubs when the band is in the middle of a set and just shouting, "Hey, play a Train song." And that the bands in East Nashville knew, no matter what, when Skip comes in and says play a Train song, you stop the song you're playing and you play a Train song. And the song is about the end of Skip's life and really seeing him in the totality of who he was, which was not perfect, but beautiful. And anyway, so I'm talking to Todd about how he sees that as his calling in life, is to document the lives of these people and his own interactions with them. And, you know, it occurred to me as I was talking to him about it, that that's why I feel so close to him as an artist, because in his live shows, he would tell those stories of the people he met before he would play the songs about them. And so you would get this unbelievably rich experience where you get the story, and then you get the song that kind of elevates the story even more into this thing that is, you know, a song kind of sanctifies the subject of the song. And so he was sanctifying these people. And through the implication that he just lived this life and then put it in the songs and then came to us and shared the stories with us and shared the songs with us, we were kind of all part of it. And it just made you feel, if you loved his music, it just made you feel so close to him. And I don't pretend that I really knew him or anything, but it felt like I did. That's one of the things I loved about his music. So we're talking about all this, the life of the troubadour and why it feels like it's a calling for him. And he says, but I think those days are over. I'm not going to be that person anymore. And I said, well, why? What's going on? And he said, well, I have this degenerative arthritis and I can't play my guitar a lot of days. I can barely move. I can't do anything. And my whole body locks up, and it's just been getting worse and worse and worse for years. And I haven't really been playing very much because I am scared that I'm going to get on stage in front of people and just not be able to perform. And it'll be so embarrassing. And I said, I have to say, I noticed you'd been off the road for the past couple of years. I didn't really know what was going on, and I'm so sorry to hear this. And then I asked him, I said, he always had this thing that he said in his live shows that I have always loved, and I've written it down in a million notebooks. I think it's a beautiful artistic creed. He would often say, he would be talking about, why he's a musician, and it was part of his onstage patter. He would say it at the beginning of a lot of shows, and he would say, I didn't come here to change your mind about anything. I came here to ease my own mind about everything. I always thought that was beautiful, really beautiful, and like a real truth about where the creative spirit, when it comes to making things, ought to come from. But so in this interview I was doing with him, I said, you say this thing often in your shows. If you're not going to be performing anymore, making up songs, are you going to be able to ease your mind? And he said no. And so we get to the end of the interview, and I just remember walking back to my desk and thinking, something's wrong. It feels like the conversation we just had was indicative of something. I didn't know what I meant specifically about that, other than I thought, I'm glad I've gone to see him as many times as I have. I'm glad I have spent as much time as I have with his records, because I'm worried he might not be able to keep performing. So it's the night before the show in Phoenix, and I'm finishing my edit of the story I'm doing about him for the radio show. And I get this email from the venue where he was supposed to perform saying the show has been postponed. And I can't say that I was surprised, I was definitely really sad. So I write a new ending for the story that reflects that. And that's a Sunday night that's happening. So that Monday we air the story. And then later that Monday I'm trying to figure out what happened, to see if there's any news about why the show was postponed. And on Todd Snider's Instagram page, they put up this really horrifying note that says, "We're really sad to announce that the rest of Todd's tour has been postponed indefinitely. He was the victim of a violent assault in Salt Lake City, and he has sustained these injuries that have made it impossible for him to perform. We're confident that he's going to make a full recovery, but he's not going to be able to do the tour." So what a horrible thing to read about anybody, in particular somebody who, even if you don't know, you feel like you know and care about in this really emotional way. And then about a week and a half goes by, and this past Friday night, I look at Instagram again, and I see that Todd's team has put up another update saying Todd's not doing well. Like, send good thoughts. And it says something about how in going through the medical treatments that were necessary after this incident, whatever the violent incident was, it was determined that he had this walking pneumonia. And just please send good thoughts. And I just remember thinking, oh no. And then I woke up on Saturday, and there was another really terrible post that said that he had died. Which means that conversation that I had with him, it's one of the last interviews he ever gave. And I can't believe that it happened, but I kind of can. You know, it seemed like something was wrong. I'm not saying I know what happened. I don't know what happened. But now he's gone. And I feel this kind of perverse sense of gratitude that I got to talk to him so close to the end and make this little record that I would never pretend is a complete account of who he was, but that I hope captures a little something of what was really special about him and preserves it so that other people might be able to discover his music if they don't know about it already. And that's the reason that I'm making this post today on Substack, is because I really hope you'll listen to the piece. Because I think what was really special about Todd Snider is that he lived his work. And his work was his life. That wasn't always healthy for him. I think a lot of times it wasn't healthy for him. But it allowed him to document a range of humanity that we wouldn't have a record of if it wasn't for him. And I think that's important. And I think it's beautiful. And I have been having this thought, that guy Skip Litz that I was telling you about, who's the main character in Train Song, who was a messy but beautiful person. One of the things Todd says in the stories that he tells about Skip before he plays Train Song is that because Skip was such a fixture in the East Nashville music community, people would sometimes say to Skip, are you a songwriter? And Skip would say, no, I'm a song. And I guess what I've been reflecting on this weekend is that Todd Snider and Skip Litz are not the same person, but I think that one of the reasons Todd maybe fixated on that quote from Skip, "I'm not a songwriter, I'm a song," is maybe because on some level that's how Todd thought of himself too, or at least it's how I think of him. I realize now that he was an artist who lived his life in such harmony with his art that at a certain point they became one and the same. And that is sad in the sense that it led to a lot of heartache and pain for him, and I think a lot of people who knew him in some situations. But it's also such a gift because the music that he left behind, to a very profound extent, really is him. He really is still alive and with us in this music that he made. And I can't believe that I was fortunate enough to get to talk to him in a moment where he was pondering all of that. And it became an invitation for me to ponder all of that. And I pass that invitation along to all of you now. I hope you'll listen to the piece that I made about the great and dearly departed Todd Snider. Thank you as always for reading / I guess in this case watching my Substack. And I send my very best to all of you.